It is a great honour to be named Defender of Western Civilization. Western civilization has come in for a lot of attack because it's Western. The word Western has been taken to be a standard term of abuse by so many people in the world today, and in particular by people who don't have the faintest idea what it means historically, metaphysically, or poetically. Our Western civilization is not some peculiar, narrow little obsession of people who happen to live in a certain geographical part of the world. It is an inheritance, constantly expanding, constantly including new things, something which has given us the knowledge of the human heart, which has enabled us to produce not just our wonderful economies and the wonderful ways of living in the world that are ours, but also the great works of art, the religions, the systems of law and government, all the other things which make it actually possible for us to recognise that we live in this world, insofar as possible, successfully. Let's leave aside the idea of Western civilization. After all, it depends which way you're going around the globe, whether it's west or east. Look instead at the idea of civilization. What is it? What is a civilization? It is surely a form of connection between people, a way in which people understand not just their languages, their customs, their forms of behaviour, but the way in which they connect to each other, eye to eye, face to face, in the day-to-day life which they share. This is something which has ordinary dimensions in the workplace and in the community, in our day-to-day making do with things, but also it has a high culture built upon it, works of art, literature, music, architecture and so on, ways of changing the world so as to be more at home in it. And I think that is the distinctive feature of Western civilization, that it is a comprehensive civilization, constantly giving us new ways of being at home, ways of being in relation to each other which bring peace and interest as the primary bonds between our neighbours. Now, I myself have obviously got into an awful lot of trouble through defending Western civilization, and it seems a strange feature of our times that the more you're disposed to defend it, the more you are regarded as some kind of narrow-minded bigot. But the people who make that accusation are the real ones with the narrow mind. They're people who do not see exactly how large and comprehensive our civilization has been and still is. We were brought up on, for example, the Hebrew Bible, an ancient document which perpetuates the civilization of the pre-classical Middle East, gives us a sense of what people are like in tribal communities when wandering through deserts and so on. We learned and studied the great epics of Rome and Greece, which taught us different languages, dead languages, but languages which showed the world in a different light from our own languages today. We were brought up again on the literature of the Middle Ages, much of it influenced by Arabian literature, of course. Indeed, we all were put to bed with bedtime stories from the Arabian Nights. The further you look into it, the more comprehensive and universal do you see the inheritance of our civilization to be. And that is something that we tend to forget today. It isn't a narrow bequest. It is something which actually is open to all kinds of innovation, which accepts the whole of human being as its subject matter. And certainly that is the way I have looked at it. I've always rejoiced in being a teacher of the humanities, because I recognise that humanities is what it's about. It's about being human and all the many ways in which that way of being is diversified and comprehensive in the world in which we are today. Whatever we do, we must fight back against this accusation that somehow our civilization is narrow, dogmatic, bigoted, exclusive. It is not so. Why are we now being forced into a defensive position when it's so obviously the case to anybody who knows anything about it that what we call Western civilization is another name for civilization as such? and for all the achievements of civilization that young people need to know about and, if possible, to acquire. The problem, it seems to me, stems largely from the invasion of the academic and intellectual world by activist groups who do not take the trouble to learn enough to know what they're up against, but nevertheless define their position in terms of political agendas. These political agendas are all about belonging together in a salvationist group. You know, we save ourselves because we believe the right things, and we're looking everywhere for those poisonous presences which are trying to exclude us from possession of our rightful heritage. And all the new causes are chosen on these grounds. They're causes of people who want to feel that the existing order of things excludes them, and therefore they are justified in overthrowing that order in order to give themselves a place at the top of it. And being at the top, they then will rearrange it so as to purify it of all those old and corrupting influences which have so far have had too much of a deal. Now, I think this invasion of political activism into universities and into the humanities and into all the channels of civilization is one of the great disasters of our age. But it didn't have to occur. We don't have to listen to these people. We don't have to engage in the show trials, the letters of denunciation, or the ways in which people have been witch hunted and driven from the community. It's only because we join in that these activists have any success. We don't have to join in. The time has come, it seems to me, for people like me and the older generation of teachers to give courage to young people, to say that, look, you have a civilization, an inheritance, which helps you to understand these things. Giving way to activism of this kind, activism which excludes whole realms of human knowledge, is not doing yourself a favour. It's not bringing to you the things that you actually need in the world into which you're going to progress. What you need to do is engage in dialogue, which is what civilization is about. Try to understand the human condition in all its complexity. And when people try to radicalize and politicize the curriculum and what is taught and thought about in universities, you don't have to go along with this. You can even laugh at them. It still actually is legally permitted to laugh at people in our country and in our civilization. And after all, comedy is one of the great gifts of civilization, and it's up to you, I think, to exercise it. So my concluding message is that we shouldn't despair of Western civilization. It's just that we should be careful to recognize that we're not talking about some narrow, small-minded thing called Western. We're talking about an open, generous and creative thing called civilization.